So, okay, childcare is a workplace issue. It's also a business issue. And it's a business issue that disproportionately impacts women in the workplace. Our next speaker is locally known and nationally recognized as an expert on the issue. And to introduce her, we've asked one of this year's scholarship participants to do the honors. Now, you might recognize the fact that the introducer shares the same last name. But I have to tell you, Maddie Oppenheimer has already put together a resume of her own. She's in her third year of serving on the student council at Boise High School. She also serves on the Mayor's Council for Children and Youth for the city of Boise. And when she comes up here, you might just recognize her from her place atop the Capitol steps as the organizer of the 2019 Women's March. I give you Maddie Oppenheimer.
Hello everyone, my name is Maddie Oppenheimer. I'm 17 years old, a senior at Boise High, and I'm honored to introduce our next keynote speaker, my mom, Beth Oppenheimer. Beth has raised me to be the woman I am today and has taught me so many valuable lessons along the way. She is dedicated to advocating for the needs of children and is committed to advancing opportunities for all Idaho families. Since 2010, Beth has served as the executive director for the Idaho Association for the Education of Young Children, an organization geared towards advancing Idaho's early learning profession and advocating for children, families, and those who work on behalf of young children. In her role at Idaho AEYC, she works tirelessly to ensure that all families have access to healthy, safe, and quality childcare and early childhood programs. Idaho is one of the few states that has yet to implement state-funded early childhood education. This lack of investment in the future keeps her up at night, and I know that because I witness it firsthand. She has taught me how important it is for every child to have an equal opportunity to a healthy and happy childhood, no matter their background. Beth is extremely involved in her community and currently serves on several boards and committees, including the Anders Center for Public Policy at Boise State, the International Women's Forum, AEUW, and the Treasure Valley YMCA. And if that wasn't enough, in 2016, she was elected to serve on the Boise School District Board of Trustees. Beth was recognized as an Idaho Business Review's Women of the Year in both 2013 and 2018, as well as one of Idaho Business Review's CEO of Influence in 2017. Along with all of the work that she has done in the community, she is an incredible wife to her husband Jonathan and a mother to both myself and my 12-year-old sister. She has always taught my sister and I to be grateful of the opportunities we are given at such a young age. I had a phenomenal early childhood education and have been fortunate enough to grow up in the Boise School District. It is precisely because of this that my mother was able to work for the success of the present while ensuring the success of the future. Having her as a mother has not only taught me the importance of being actively involved in supporting one's community, but also to fight tirelessly and endlessly for what you believe in. She has proven this by being a champion for early childhood education and is an inspiration to all those who are fortunate enough to know her. And with that, it is my honor to introduce to you Beth Oppenheimer.
Sally Jewell said it was okay to cry, right? I heard her say that. Thank you, Maddie. So proud of you. And, I'm so proud of all of our young leaders, especially the ones who are here today. So I know they've had a lot of recognition, but, I got to tell you, I'm feeling really good about our future. I really am. Maddie and her fellow students are pretty amazing. So Thank you. All right, so why are we here? So you're probably wondering why we are at a Women in Leadership Conference and why we are, can we get the PowerPoint up too, please? Oh, there it is. Why we're at a Women in Leadership Conference and why are we talking about early childhood education, right? I'm sure a lot of you are thinking that. Well, last year, Tracy and Katie and I were talking after the Women in Leadership Conference, and we were sharing how great it was and what a great opportunity it is for women in our communities to get professional development opportunities, to advance in their career, to grow in their career, etc. And I shared that I felt that there's something missing from this piece of the puzzle, right? There's a little piece that's missing from this puzzle. And it's a topic that oftentimes, well, it's near and dear to my heart, but it's oftentimes never really talked about, right? And as we continue to talk about advancing in our careers and growing in our profession, we need to think about, and more specifically, we need to start talking about what are those support systems that women need to help achieve their goals. And one of those biggest support systems that impacts women's ability to achieve their professional goals is also something that nobody really talks about. And that issue is childcare. And it's important that we start having this conversation. I think Sally Jewell referenced it a little bit, which I was really happy to see that she did that. Most often people don't think of it this way. And early childhood education, it's a workforce issue. And it's a workforce issue that impacts not only today's workforce, but it also impacts tomorrow's workforce. And so we're going to talk about that today. So I know that some of you are thinking right now, I don't have kids. I don't plan to have kids. I had kids a long time ago, something. So before you skip out and hit cocktail hour early, because I know I'm standing in between you and this fabulous reception, before you get out and go, I want to do a little exercise. So I want you to stand up if you have ever had challenges with childcare. You've been late to work, you've missed work, you couldn't find childcare. Stand up if you've had challenges. All right, now I want you to stand up if a family member has had challenges. Your sister calls and says, Beth, Bobby's sick today, I gotta get to work and I don't have any childcare. Stand up if a coworker hasn't been able to make it to work because they had challenges with childcare or something. And they're like, could you take this meeting for me, right? What about your boss? What about your friends? So I think that you can see the fact is that childcare has an impact on all of us, whether we have kids or not. So let's talk a little bit about the workforce of today and the workforce of tomorrow, and what does that really mean, right? Well, American business depends on a strong workforce, now and in the future, to be able to compete and succeed globally, right? That's not a secret. But what we're seeing is America is facing a workforce crisis, and this is true. Today we are seeing that a large and growing shortage of skilled workers. We hear it all the time from our business leaders. And we're also seeing adults, mostly women, mind you, having to choose between participating in the workforce or staying at home with their children. Again, Sally Jewell just mentioned this a little bit. So access to affordable early childhood education is a barrier for too many parents to either enter, to re-enter, or to stay in the workforce. And our child care challenge is really threatening the productivity of the workforce today, as well as the quality of the workforce tomorrow. And we believe that high-quality childcare is an under-recognized but promising strategy for addressing America's workforce. And if we do it right, childcare provides a powerful two-generation approach to supporting and then building the skilled workforce that our country depends on. There it is over there. Oh, wait. Next slide. There we go. So does this picture look familiar to any of you? Probably. I kind of grew up in this family. I don't think I was running out to greet my father at the end of the day, but maybe I was. So how many times have you heard in your lives that childcare is a woman's issue? Right? That's a women's issue. We're not going to talk about that. Or that women should be at home with their children. I've had people say that to me. But the truth is that the structure of the family has fundamentally shifted over time in this country, and parents today are working more than they ever have before. And no longer is it true that one parent stays home, typically the woman, right? Or one parent goes to work. That's not really the case anymore. So let's talk about the workforce of today. What do we see? Well, what we know is that about 2/3 of children under the age of 6 live in homes where both parents work. And that's compared to just 1 in 10 in 1940. So that's huge. We're seeing a growing population. And women today make up nearly half of the American workforce. I think it's like 49% or 48% or something like that. So we're getting up there. In addition to that, women are 40% of primary breadwinners in their household. Okay? We also want to take a look at who's having children. And more often than not, it's not the 60-year-old CEO that's having children, although I guess it happens, I don't know. Maybe it does. Sometimes it does, I guess. But, it's our younger generation. And millennials make up over 1/3 of our workforce. And millennial women are responsible for 8 in 10 births. Now, of course, that has to do with age, right? But that's something to think about when we think about who's having children today and who's making the policies within the businesses or our local and state or federal governments around this issue. Just before 1970, we saw a pretty significant jump in the participation of women's participation in the workforce, and this has resulted in significant economic gains, and women make major economic contributions to business, their families, and society, right? And you will see here that without women's labor force participation since 1970, our overall economy today would be about $2 trillion less, and our median family income would be about $14,000 less. That number actually seems kind of low to me, and I think that we're going to see that number continue to climb. But however, women's labor force participation has kind of stagnated. We saw this huge increase of women participating in the workforce, but then in the last several years, we're kind of seeing that stagnating, and some reports even say that it's dropping in recent years. And a lot of that is due to childcare issues, right? Childcare options. Access to affordable, quality childcare, access and affordability are the two biggest factors that we see that impacts parents' ability to participate in our workforce today. So last month, we commissioned a statewide survey. And we commissioned this survey to find out what the impact here in Idaho, the impact that childcare has on parents' ability to participate in the workforce. And we also surveyed businesses to find out what that impact has been on businesses to recruit and retain a qualified workforce or qualified talent. And we worked with Geostrategy Group, who is a national opinion research firm, who they're based here in Boise, and they're absolutely fantastic. If you ever need a research firm, I highly recommend them. And they surveyed 226 parents with children ages 0 to 5, and they also surveyed 100 businesses here throughout Idaho. And we asked both of those sets of groups, we asked them questions in regards to how does the lack of childcare impact parents' ability to participate in the workforce, and also the business's ability to recruit talent. And this is what we found out. When we asked if working parents ever had challenges arranging for childcare, almost 60% said yes. I mean, you saw in this room a minute ago, almost everyone was standing up. So, but we asked parents if they've ever had challenges. 60% said yes. Of that 60%, 70% of those respondents were women. Then when we asked business leaders if their company provides supports for employees' childcare needs, 61% said no. So what we're seeing is that working families are having challenges, and our businesses aren't responding to that. They're not responding to that. However, the businesses also recognize that if they did offer family supports for their employees, they recognize that they would be able to attract and retain the best talent and be more competitive. And then we asked businesses what the biggest barrier would be to providing supports, such as help with childcare for their employees. And their number one answer was what? Money. It was cost. Cost too much. Can't implement it, cost too much. Can't run it, cost too much. That's not our business. That's the woman's business. That's the family business, right? So, honestly, I would challenge that question, and I would turn that question around and ask our businesses, what's the cost of not doing it? What's the cost of not doing it? Oh, I have to point it this way, they said. There we go. Okay. I know that this is small, and I know that you can't see it, but I just put it on there anyway. Sorry. You can walk up there and look. So we also presented a series of examples of certain challenges that families might face as a result of working and having children. And what we found is that 71% had to take personal time off because of challenges with childcare. And then we also found out that 65% said that they had been late to work or missed a day at work due to challenges with childcare. How much is that costing businesses? When people can't show up to work because they don't have childcare, what's that costing? 61% had to reduce their regular hours at work. So here we have a skilled and talented person in that position, and all of a sudden they say, I have to cut my hours, and I can't work that full-time job anymore. Now the business has to look at filling those hours in those positions with somebody else, which costs money. And then the other one I want to point out is that 14.6% of respondents of working parents said that they had been reprimanded or fired because of challenges with childcare, which I can't even imagine, but it's true, it happens. On the flip side of that, we asked the business leaders those exact same questions, and they were pretty much in line with what the parents said. One of the pieces that the final piece that they answered was they actually responded that 24% had had to reprimand or fire someone because of childcare challenges, which seems terrible. Another factor that we found out in our survey, among working parents with children ages 0 to 5, affordability was by far the number one challenge for parents that they face. Childcare is very expensive. And when asked on a scale of 1 to 10 how important affordability when choosing childcare, 75% said it was the number one issue that they worry about. And so, that number is huge, right? Affordability. These are people, remember, who are millennials. They are a younger generation. They're having kids. Oftentimes, they're in the beginning of their career, which means that they're at the bottom of their pay scale, mostly. They've got student loans to pay off. They've got mortgages. We know how high rent and mortgage is, if they even have mortgages, but rent is just as high. These are folks that don't have a lot of extra money, and now you throw on top of it the cost of childcare, and it's just almost impossible. It's almost impossible for families at this point. So in this question also that I have to point out is that the second most important aspect when looking for childcare is that they really cared about the curriculum that focused on child development and high quality. point over there. Oh, sorry. Okay. So finally, we asked working parents if you had access to more affordable childcare, would you or your child's other parent or guardian be more likely to X in relation to employment and work? So would you be more likely to look for a higher paying job? 28, almost 28% said that they would look for a more higher paying job if they had access to reliable childcare. We were having this conversation the other day, and someone said, why would that be? Why wouldn't somebody just go look for a higher paying job, regardless if they have childcare? And I had to remind them that if you are at a higher paying job or a more skilled job, that oftentimes means more responsibility, oftentimes more hours, less flexibility. And so the impact that that has, if you don't have secure childcare, it's too much of a risk to go for that job, that higher job. So basically, people say, if I had childcare, I would be more inclined to grow professionally in my career, but I don't really have access to stable, secure, affordable childcare, so I kind of have to stay where I am right now, which again is putting a lot of pressure on our businesses and contributing to some of the factors that we see with their ability to recruit and retain a skilled workforce. So we're going to take a deeper dive into this information, and you can see some of the other things too up here, but we're going to take a deeper dive into this issue in terms of what the impact of the lack of affordable quality childcare has on our society here in Idaho. We're just getting ready to start, or we just are starting today, a project with the U.S. Chamber Foundation, and we're partnering with the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry, AEYC, with this work. So the president of AEYC, Alex LeBeau, he's currently participating as a fellow with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is talking a lot about childcare right now, really through the workforce lens. And so he's participating in that. And so the U.S. Chamber has selected Idaho as one of 4 states that they're going to be working with in the next couple of months to do a deep dive. And they're going to be doing an economic impact study on the lack of affordable quality childcare in our workforce. And so they will be doing that over the next couple of months. They're also going to be collecting stories around everyday people who have challenges with childcare. So with that, on your tables, if you've ever had challenges with childcare and you want to share your story, we're really looking for Idaho parents' stories. On your tables, there's a little card that asks you to share your story, and it directs you to Idaho AEYC, and you'll see that website come up. I don't know where the website is. Okay. It's on the PowerPoint, I promise. You'll see that come up, and it has an opportunity for you to share your story. So the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, they'll be collecting these stories. They possibly will do a little video around this, but we really do need those stories because it plays into this whole report that we're going to do with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And I'm so thankful that AEYC is engaged in this conversation. As a matter of fact, at their conference this summer, they invited Catherine Stevens, who is with the American Enterprise Institute, to come and talk about this issue with their members as well as legislators. So it was really good that they are engaged in this conversation because they are really seeing the impact of what it means to parents not have access to quality or affordable childcare. So stay tuned for that. The report is supposed to be released in February. And then we'll be doing a couple events this spring to really release the reports of that. So Idaho, we're so thankful that Idaho is one of 4 states that they're going to be doing a deep dive in. So look for that. All right, so we talked a lot about the cost being a barrier to childcare, to folks being able to participate. So let's talk a little bit about what the cost is. Okay? It's expensive. Let's just say that. It's really expensive. And if you can find it, then you might not be able to afford it. The percent of median income that the average family spends on childcare for 2 children is 22%. So 22% of your income. Again, remember, look at who's having children. They're kind of at the bottom of their salary range. They are, again, having to pay student loans or their high rent, whatever that looks like. So that's expensive. There is a lot of talk right now on that number specifically at the federal level, and I know that folks on both Republican and Democrat side are talking about this issue. So it'll be interesting to see. There's a proposal out there that would cap a family's income expense at 7%. Of their income would go towards childcare. So we'll see what happens with that. It's kind of nice that we're getting this kind of attention at the national level, and people are really thinking about it across the country. The annual cost of childcare for an infant is about $7,300. That's average, okay? I know that there are a lot of places, especially here in the Treasure Valley, that you're spending about $900 to $1,000 a month for childcare. If you have 2 children, an infant and a 4-year-old, that number jumps to about $13,000, almost $14,000 a year for childcare. As a point of comparison, the average year's tuition is at a public university, and it is about $7,250, almost $7,300. And then an average annual mortgage payment in Idaho is about $14,000. And so if you look at the cost of childcare, it's almost impossible for families to be able to do this. In Idaho, the average single parent must spend nearly a third of their income to pay for infant care, and married parents with 2 children living at the poverty line, they're paying about 55% of their household income on childcare. 55%. Can you imagine spending 55% of your income on childcare and as you're trying to get by? So working parents are having to make some pretty significant decisions. Are they going to stay in their career, or are they going to stay at home? What's going to happen? Let's talk really quickly about availability. We talked about affordability and availability being the 2 highest challenges that we have. 49% of people living in Idaho live in a childcare desert. So a childcare desert is any census tract with more than 50 children under the age of 5 that contains either no childcare providers or so few options that there are more than 3 times as many children as licensed childcare slots. So in Ada County alone, we are seeing that there are 11 children per 1 childcare slot. So the availability is just literally not there. If we go up north to Shoshone County, that childcare desert, that gap is 33 children per 1 slot. And if we go over to eastern Idaho, that number is about 17 children to 1 slot. So availability is a huge piece, and there's just not enough slots for children, which puts an enormous strain on women's ability to participate in the workforce, and also it puts a huge strain on our industry leaders' ability to hire and retain talent. So I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk about how childcare strengthens the workforce of tomorrow, the workforce of today, workforce of tomorrow. And those of you who know me know that I'm going to talk about this. So when we are supporting parents of young children to enter and remain in the workforce, we know that childcare plays a critical role in laying the foundation for our future workforce. And we know that a competitive, strong workforce begins with a strong education system. And historically, we have viewed the start of a child's education system of when they enter school, right? That's when education starts. That's when children start learning. But we know, and in Idaho, that's in kindergarten, by the way. But we know now that the path to a good education and successful career, it really starts at birth. And we know that because we know a lot more about brain development than we've ever known before. And we know that in the first 3 years of life, a child's brain is the most impressionable. And many of you may be thinking, well, childcare is just babysitting, right? So why are we talking about this, and how does this impact children's learning? Well, I mentioned Catherine Stevens earlier, and she's with the American Enterprise Institute, and she's been studying this issue for a really long time, and child development, child care, etc. And she says this so perfectly. She says, well, children are continuously learning from the moment that they are born, wherever they are, and from whomever they are with, meaning the commonly made distinction between care and education in early childhood is a false one. Children are learning whatever environment they are in, whether it's at home, whether it's in childcare, wherever that might be. And so children are always learning. Childcare in Idaho serves as our early childhood education system. We don't have preschool. Children can enter school when they go to kindergarten, but childcare as a whole is serving as that early childhood system. It's the quality that matters. So we know that investing in children's earliest years is a long-term upstream strategy for developing our nation's human capital. And again, early childhood education, it really lays the foundation for our child's brain in the most impressionable time of their lives. We place a lot of emphasis on academic achievement. When we talk about education, we talk about learning. And it's really those, how many letters do you know, how many numbers do you know, et cetera. But it's really those non-cognitive skills, those soft skills that our businesses are looking for. And I often say to businesses when they're looking for skilled workforce, I say, so what are the skills that you're missing when you can't hire somebody? Is it they can't read? I mean, is that what it is? And they say, oh no, we're looking for folks that can get along with one another. We're looking for folks that can problem solve. We're looking for folks that can follow directions. We're looking for folks that can think creatively. And it's always fun to remind them that those skills are the skills that are learned when you're a young child. Between those ages of 0, 3, and 0 and 5. It's really hard, no offense to our high school students, but it's really hard to teach those soft skills in high school. That's when you're really looking at the academics. So if you really want to invest in education, invest in those early years, if those are the skills that you're looking for as a workforce. All right, so when it's all said and done, we know that childcare has a tremendous impact on our workforce, but how does childcare strengthen today's workforce? Let's talk a little bit about that. We know that the lack of access plays a significant barrier and limits our talent pool. But what if businesses took on the challenge to helping solve this problem? Well, if we know that it can help increase completion of post-secondary education, just like our family structure has changed over the years, so is our population of higher ed students. A lot of higher ed students are juggling family, work, and school. And without access to childcare, it's really hard to complete your college education. It's really difficult to do that. We're lucky that a lot of our colleges and universities, as a matter of most of them in Idaho, do offer childcare to our students, but it's simply not enough. It's simply not enough. The other thing that can happen if businesses help to participate in this is it will raise the labor force participation, right? We talked a lot about that. It also boosts workforce productivity. So many times parents go to work and they're distracted. They dropped off their kid at childcare and just something didn't seem right or feel right, so they're thinking about it all day and they're not able to really focus on the work at hand. And so the lack of quality programs really affects that productivity. It also, like I said, helps to attract and retain local talent. So again, offering family-friendly workplace benefits, it's a win-win-win. We are going to strengthen our business, it's good for children, and it's really good for the health of our economy. And again, we're going to find out exactly what that looks like here in a couple of months. So let's talk about what you can do as business leaders. I know that there's a lot of business leaders in this audience, and I know that there's a lot of folks that have influence within their business to actually help and support this. Now, I preface this by saying that I am not here to tell businesses that they need to get into the childcare business. But I will say that there are some things that you can do, and there are some family-friendly policies that you can all adopt within your companies to help support working families. One of the things that you can do is partner with existing childcare programs. If you can find some programs within your area, you can look at paying for slots within that childcare program and offer that as a benefit to your employees. We're seeing a lot more of that happening now than we've ever seen before. Also, you can help to subsidize or reimburse for childcare. It's a benefit. So a lot of companies offer healthcare benefits. Businesses can also offer some subsidy, a couple $1,000s to help with pay for childcare. That is a huge recruitment tool that we can do for our families. And while I said that I don't think that you should get into the business of starting childcare, you could. If you wanted to, you could. A lot of companies are actually looking into this right now, doing on-site childcare. And one of the things that they're doing, it's not that you have to start a childcare program, but you can contract with businesses that do this. This is a business. There's a business called Bright Horizons, and they work with businesses to open up childcare programs within or around that company. I just talked to a woman from Bright Horizons the other day, and she said that, she said, it's really interesting. She said, I've been with Bright Horizons for 12 years, and I've never heard anything from Idaho. I've never had businesses contact me or talk about this from Idaho. It's been crickets. There are no Bright Horizons programs in Idaho. She said, but literally in the last 6 months, she said that she has received several calls from working parents or from businesses exploring this opportunity of how do we get a Bright Horizons in here. Bright Horizons will come in, they'll start the child care program, the business basically helps pay for it, the parents pay for it, but they do the recruiting, they do the liability, they do all of this stuff to make it easier for businesses to offer child care to their families. She also said that in Utah, she said Utah, and I said, tell me about Utah, we love Utah. Whatever Utah's doing, that's what we're doing. So she said prior to 2014, they only had 2 Bright Horizons programs in Salt Lake. She said since 2014, 5 companies have started a Bright Horizons childcare program in that area. And she said the impact that it's having on their ability to attract and retain a workforce has skyrocketed, and she said that there's 3 others or something like that they're working on. So that's something that you can do, and I know that she said that some companies are doing that. I want to talk a little bit about Preschool the Idaho Way. Preschool the Idaho Way is another option that communities can get together. Preschool the Idaho Way is a project that Idaho AEYC started last year, and what we're doing is we are working with communities throughout Idaho. Currently, we've got 14 communities that we're working with, and we're helping them figure out and navigate how to start an early childhood program. Because we know that Grangeville looks a lot different than Pocatello, looks a lot different than Coeur d'Alene, different than Boise. And so we designed a toolkit on our website that really helps communities walk through what it's like to build a quality childcare program. And so it's really exciting to see that happen. There was just a kickoff up in Sandpoint, I want to say. I think that's right. And they're starting to really come together and figure this out. So that's an exciting project. It's also a project that businesses can help invest in and work through. All right, getting started, know the law. I'm not an attorney. I don't pretend to be an attorney, but know the law around childcare and early childhood if you want to start something like that. There's lots of support around that you can get. Look at your current benefits that you offer, that's offered in your company, and know what they are. Know what they are. It's so surprising to me so many times that people say, I don't know what our benefits are in our company. So know what they are. Also, do a survey of your employees. Find out what they want and what their needs are, and I think that that's very telling. The other piece to help with that is, I know I'm out of time, Tracy. On our website, idahoaeyc.org, we are just launching today. We have a toolkit that is going to help businesses kind of walk through this process so that you'll see If you are a business that wants to explore what are all of my options in supporting our employees with family-friendly policies, not just childcare, but other family-friendly policies, on our website, you will see a laundry list and kind of a guidebook of things that you can do within your company. And again, we're just launching that today, so that's kind of cool. Contact Idaho AEYC. If you are looking for childcare, one of our projects that we manage is the Idaho Stars Project. If you call 211 and ask for childcare referral, they walk you through a laundry list of what you're looking for, and they really help to navigate finding childcare in your area across Idaho. It helps you identify existing programs, helps you understand the childcare licensing laws, standards for high quality, what to look for when you're looking for childcare. Oftentimes, parents just don't know, what do I look for when I'm looking for a high quality program? And then identify contracted childcare providers. I talked a little bit about that too. So at the end of the day, this is something that I think that we need to start talking about. And it's interesting to me that it's always been this issue that's always been so silent, and I love to see this issue rising up. But our businesses need to start paying attention to this. And I know that there's so many working moms and working dads that do need support, and so we need to do everything together. The federal government's not going to solve this problem. Businesses alone are not going to solve this problem, but I think together, collectively, communities throughout Idaho, we can get this figured out, and we can do a better job of really supporting our workforce of today while helping to grow our workforce of tomorrow. Thank you. Are we doing questions?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
We're doing
stay right where you
stay
are.
here.
Okay, we've got 15 minutes of questions, and you can't get into the reception yet, so you might as well hang out here with us. So, if you've got questions for Beth, send them up to me. In the meantime, Beth, I know that we're starting to see the Idaho Association, AEYC, Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry, pay attention to childcare. That's a first. They've never paid attention to childcare. Why are they telling you that they are paying attention to that now?
Well, it's funny. Alex and I are pretty good friends. He's the president, and every year for the past almost 10 years, we get together and have coffee or drink or something, and I say, Alex, when are we going to start talking about early childhood? When are we going to get you engaged in this conversation? And he's always wanted to. It's just, it's a tough issue. But since he's been participating as a fellow with the U.S. Chamber Foundation, it's really opened his eyes to this as an issue that really attracts his membership. And so if it's really looking at early childhood through the workforce lens, if that's what it's going to take to get this conversation started, let's do that. Because we know that if we can offer high-quality early childhood programs because of our workforce, we know it's only going to benefit young children and families as well.
Does your impact study also evaluate the need for 24-hour licensed child care facilities for shift workers due to all the manufacturing facilities we have in Idaho?
Yeah, that is a really good question. And we did not explore that question when we looked at it, but we absolutely recognize that is a challenge. Childcare outside of the normal 9 to 5 hours is one of the biggest challenges that we have in this country. But those are the conversations that we're hoping to get businesses engaged and involved in understanding that childcare is just not a 9 to 5 issue. It is a big issue. I'm also hoping that the work that the U.S. Chamber Foundation is doing to talk about this issue, that we can address it there. Great question.
The questioner lives in Idaho Falls and loves their child care center, but they're suffering a worker shortage. And I'm sure that happens all over the state. What can be done about that?
That is, our child care worker shortage is enormous in this country. Child care providers in Idaho, they make an average of $9.77 an hour. And that's with no benefits. These folks have one of the hardest jobs ever around. and they do it for very little money. There is a lot of discussion at the national level right now of how we are going to support our providers. And again, it's going to be a combination of solutions. We're going to have to look at federal help. We're going to have to look at business support and also state support. But that is a huge issue. And what we're seeing is fewer and fewer people are going into the field. Our colleges and universities, most of them have an early childhood department. And so we're really working to grow the workforce of child care providers and early childhood educators through our Idaho Stars project. One of the programs within that project is we offer academic scholarships to folks who want to get their degree in early childhood education. And so we have partnerships with all colleges and universities across the state to help fund, we actually pay for them to get their degrees in early childhood education. And currently, I think that we have about 60 academic scholars throughout Idaho. So we're really working hard to support our folks who want to go in the field. We also have, through our professional development system, Erin McCandless is here. She's doing a lot of work around that. She's also working with high school students in their CTE programs and helping to build a workforce of early childhood educators through that program as well. So we're hoping to continue to do that, but honestly, the pay of the positions is what's the biggest challenge.
So talk to us about your experiences with getting state standards.
State standards or state funding?
Both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go for both.
Okay, let's talk about that. So state standards. So we do have, so it depends on what standards you're talking about. Our licensing regulations and oversight in Idaho, they're the worst in the country, unfortunately. To be a child care provider in Idaho, literally you have to pass a background check, you have to fill out an application, you have to pass CPR and first aid, and you only have to have 4 hours of professional development a year to be a child care provider. We are working hard to increase that. Our Idaho Stars project really helps early childhood educators on a volunteer level increase their skills and knowledge around child development, so that's a huge help. So our standards are worse in the country. We're hoping to, this session, boost that up a little bit because we're tired of being last. In terms of funding, so funding in Idaho, many of you know, and I say it all the time, Idaho is one of a handful of states that does not have any state investments in preschool. This has been an issue that we have been trying to tackle for years and years. I will tell you that the conversation is moving forward. We have, at least people are talking about it more than they ever have before. I will tell you about 5 or 6 years ago, no one would have this conversation. But at least now people are talking about it. We have a new governor who's interested in having the conversation. There are some opportunities that might be coming in the next year for Idaho to take advantage of a preschool development grant that we've never applied for. I'm just going to say it. We've never applied for it. And there is an opportunity that we might be able to apply for this federal preschool development grant. And what that would do for us, it's not actually building programs, but it's going to give our state the ability to do a needs assessment, to explore what are our existing programs, infant toddler program, our home visiting program, our child care programs, our private preschool programs, our special ed preschool programs within our school districts. This is going to allow us to do an inventory of those existing programs, figure out what the impact is, how is it funding, and then do a needs assessment for Idaho, and then do a strategic plan. So we're hoping to hear word literally any minute. I almost had my phone on the podium. I was going to take a call if it came through, but I didn't bring it up here, to see if we're going to be able to apply for that. And if we do, this grant would take place January 1st to December 30th, and help us do this plan that will put us on a path that's really going to help us figure out how to get this funding.
So I'm going to read part of this just because it really lays it out well, and it talks about the fact, you've been talking about 0 to 5. Mm-hmm. But she said, this individual says, I struggle with my daughter in public school when it doesn't start until 9 a.m. I struggled to get to work on time, so I changed schools, and now she gets up at 5 a.m. to get to school by 7:30 a.m. Where's the balance?
Do I have to put on my school board hat for that one?
Yes.
Okay, I'll put on my school board hat for that one. Yeah, it's tough. And I get it. And I think that our education system, it's not designed for working parents. Remember, the structure of working parents has changed significantly over the last several years. Unfortunately, our education system has not changed along with it. And it is a struggle. And I don't know if there's any talk at the state level about this. I know that local communities are trying to figure, local school districts are exploring this discussion. I will tell you, it's a lot more complicated than you would think it was. Just changing a calendar by 5 minutes in a school district is, you are negotiating with 14 different contracts that you're looking at. And so the hours of a school, we have not evolved with our education system to support our working families, and it's a struggle. And I'm hoping that that conversation continues. And I encourage you to talk to your districts about it, and talk to your school districts about it, and see if there's a possibility to have that conversation.
You talked about what the future looks like as far as publicly funded pre-K options, but what about full-day kindergarten? Where are we on that?
Where are we on that? Well, I just heard yesterday that there is a recommendation that is going to move forward to hopefully fund full-day kindergarten here in Idaho. For those of you who don't know, Idaho currently funds part-time kindergarten to school districts, and it's not even, school districts don't even have to offer kindergarten at all. What we do know is a lot of school districts have taken it upon themselves to advance or to have full-day kindergarten within their districts, but it's really unequitable in the state, and those school districts that have been able to figure it out have. I will say there's challenges that come along with full-day kindergarten as well, and I'm super happy that there's a lot of conversation, and I do think that that's going to be a recommendation. Last I saw, I think it comes with, if the state were to fund full-day kindergarten across the state, it comes with like a $56 million price tag. I also know that there's a huge infrastructure problem with this. Many school districts simply do not have the space to have a full-day kindergarten. And so there's a lot of variables that come into this, but the good news is that it's a priority, and I know that it's being recommended at the governor's task force, and so we'll see what happens this session if that moves forward. But the good thing is a lot of school districts are trying to figure this out on their own.
Where does Head Start fit in all this in Idaho? How robust a program is there for Head Start?
So Head Start in Idaho is, in Head Start in our programs, we're only serving about 20% of eligible families, right? So there's 80% of eligible families that just don't have access. The number one reason for that in Idaho is because we don't put any state dollars into our Head Start program. It is all federally funded, and they are all individually federally funded as well. And so a lot of states, they're able to expand their Head Start programs in their state because they put in state dollars for that. We've never been able to do that. I know that there's a huge push with our Head Start Association to do this, and I hope that they're successful, because that is something that really could make a difference if we can expand that program here in Idaho.
We talk a lot about state-based programs, but is there any difference when you're looking at federal employees in the state of Idaho? Are the options any different?
I don't know that I understand that question.
Well, I do the federal employers, through the federal government that are employing individuals in Idaho, are there separate programs that they can access, or are they still tied to the same local Idaho-based programs?
Everyone's tied to the same thing. Yeah, we don't have any federal programs for families, working families. Mm-hmm. I've never been asked that question before.
Oh, I thought it was a good question.
That is a great question.
Yeah, it was a good question.
Whoever did that, good.
Does any of your work attempt to capture the number of people choosing not to have children due to barriers of childcare?
That is going to come out in our economic impact study that the U.S. Foundation is going to have. They're doing a deep dive. We did our survey, which was a lot more than I shared today. By the way, today's the first day that we shared that information too. So today's a big launch day. But the U.S. Chamber Foundation, I think that they are going to be looking at that really intensely to find out what that actually looks like, because we don't know.
You kind of went through this when we were talking about getting everybody to stand up. Okay, if childcare isn't directly impacting you, and you start talking about family members. Mm-hmm. But when you're out dealing, like up at the AEYC meeting with the 60-year-old CEOs that are not having babies, how do they, if they're not having childcare issues, how do you get them to pay attention to the employees that are?
Grandchildren. Seriously, grandchildren. This is I talk with a lot with our state legislators, and it's interesting to see the shift in the conversation around this topic when we start talking about state-funded preschool, for instance. No, we can't have that. I was fine. I didn't even go to kindergarten. I turned out great. I could be snarky, but I'm not going to. Or, it's not needed, or whatever that looks like. But what we do hear more often than we have before is, my daughter's really struggling with this issue, and she's having a hard time, or my son or daughter, whoever, they're having a hard time because they are working. And so again, it goes back to that the family dynamic has shifted over time. More families are working, no longer are families staying home. So while the legislator man didn't have that with a lot of men, with their own experience, they're seeing that their children are struggling to find this. So it's helping to shift the conversation.
So the businesses that are starting to get it in Idaho, I'm sure you've got some examples. What does subsidized or supported childcare look like in those businesses?
So there are a couple businesses in Idaho that do offer on-site childcare. Our hospitals, St. Luke's and St. Al's, they offer on-site childcare. Again, it's never enough. The YMCA runs those programs, and so it's a really great partnership. There are some other programs. Schweitzer, while it's in Pullman, but right across the border from Moscow, they offer on-site childcare as well. Subsidized childcare can look, however you want it to look. There are some companies that look at, again, like adding dollars to their paycheck. Companies can give employees up to $5,000 and not have it impact the employees' taxes. So if you just offered some sort of subsidy to your employees to help pay for the cost of childcare, it's a huge attractant. I want to tell a quick story about, there's a company called Lakeshore Learning, and Lakeshore Learning is in California, and they are an educational material company. They make toys and stuff for young children. I had an opportunity to visit that company this past summer, and they have an on-site childcare program. Now, it's a little bit different because they're kind of in this business, right? But so I pulled up in my Uber to get a tour of the company, and I pulled up and I saw this gentleman, and he had in his arm an infant and a toddler, and they were going to work. And I thought, how cool is that the kids get to go to work with this high-quality childcare program on site right there. So I'm thinking about the dad and how lucky he is. He doesn't have to commute 30 minutes that way to drop off the child, and then 30 minutes to work, and then have to leave exactly like at this time because he has to get to the childcare program that's 30 minutes away. Everybody's right there, and it's so good. And I talked to the president of Lakeshore, and I was talking to him, and I said, tell me a little bit about this, and how does this impact your ability to attract talent? And he said, it's unbelievable. he said, this puts us in a competitive edge. He said, when I'm recruiting people to come to this company to work, the first place that I show them, whether they have kids or not, I take them to the Child Development Center. And I do this, and if they do have kids, of course it's, oh my gosh, how great is that? The other thing is that it really speaks to the culture of that company, and the culture of that company really supports working families. I mean, it was just an eye-opener. I mean, I know that this happens and whatever, but to be able to see that gentleman with his 2 kids taking them to work and realizing all of the different variables and all of the different impacts that has on the kids, having their parents right there, the parent being, how productive they can be. They don't have to spend all this time commuting to and from childcare and dropping off and all that stuff. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Thank you. That's all we have time for. Go ahead. A nice round of applause.
Thank you.